staff position. It's the man who runs the kingdom on behalf of the king if the king is doing something more leisurely or if he just simply doesn't want to do it. The mayor of the palace is sort of the lieutenant, the right-hand man. Well, out of the mayor of the palace comes the Carolingian dynasty. The early Carolingian rulers were these mayors of the palace. And as they engaged in the politics of the day, and as they began to go to war on behalf of the Merovingians, eventually the Carolingians, as we'd later know them, began to take on power unto themselves. And so as the Merovingian star begins to fall, the star of the Carolingian dynasty begins to rise. And one of the first real serious Carolingian rulers to arise out of the mayors of the palace ranks is Pepin. Now, Pepin is also known by another name, which is Pippin, which is, of course, probably where Tolkien gets the name Pippin from his Lord of the Rings stories. And in 687, Pepin defeats one of the old arch-enemies of the Merovingians, the Thuringians. The Thuringians were a group out east, and there were all kinds of battles between the Merovingians and the Thuringians. But Pepin manages to really soundly beat the Thuringians. And because of that, he is seen somehow more in command than even the Merovingians themselves. And Pepin's son, Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer as he is later known, takes on Pepin's mantle and pursues his own military glory and his own military power. He is ruthless in battle, Charles Martel is. In fact, one of the main things he uses is cavalry, due in large part to the fact that the army that they were coming up against were largely foot soldiers. Sitting on a horse makes it much easier to dominate your enemy who's running around on his own 2 feet. And Charles Martel is vicious, he is strong, he is a military battleman. But, in fact, it is Charles Martel who begins to court a relationship with the papacy. Charles Martel hands to the papacy all of the central band of the Boot of Italy, and he gives the papacy these lands outright. And this donation of the land of central Italy to the papacy forms for the very first time what we would call for centuries, all the way down really until the modern world, the Papal States, which is a geographical position of power and strength for the papacy as it begins to expand its influence in the West. Charles Martel himself had a son, Pepin III, who would later be known as Pepin the Short. And because of the good relationships between this family and the papacy,